A spectre is haunting Europe.
Dun dun
The
dun.
spectre of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this spectre. Pope and Tsar, Metternich and Guizot, French radicals and German police spies. Where is the party in opposition that has not been decried as communistic by its opponents in power? Where is the opposition that has not hurled back the branding reproach of communism against the more advanced opposition parties, as well as against its reactionary adversaries? Two things result from this fact. One, communism is already acknowledged by all European powers to be itself a power. Two, it is high time that communists should openly, in the face of the whole world, publish their views, their aims, their tendencies, and meet this nursery tale of the specter of communism with a manifesto of the party itself.
You heard it from the man himself. Never stop posting.
That's true. Well, I have to say before we get into it, that's a good perspective, Mr. Marx and Mr. Engels, sir, on what communism is. However, my buddies over at r/Kotaku in action, I was seeing what they had to say about the Communist Manifesto. And somebody asked a really good question. I would normally not like just say a random person's username, but user a wild giraffe, however, asks, the Battlefield games used to be historically authentic. Many fans tell me to go play military simulators when I criticize modern Battlefield games, revealing that they don't even know the original games were never military simulators. Does Marxism have anything to do with this? I feel as things may be getting dumber over time. Woke might possibly be sabotaging my games. So
Wow.
I will say, Marx failed to mention that actually communism is about making this guy's games worse. In the comments, he elaborates it's because you can play as a Arab guy in the third game or fourth game.
Oh my
Um,
god.
so so Marx may have had something to do with this.
Communism is when Arab guy.
That's true. But as Thomas Sankara once said, the revolution can never succeed without the mass slaughter of gamers.
What do we know? What could be? How are the union and the socialist be? Everything I can need, oh I need, oh I need, oh I need, oh what could be? Oh what could be? Oh what could be? Oh what could be? Oh.
Welcome back to Workers Lit. It is your favorite podcast about going back to the origins, at least this week, because we are talking about Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, the Communist Manifesto. And Lenore, I know every single week you're like, I haven't read this. I'm illiterate. You've read this one, though. I
I
know
have,
you've read
yeah.
this one. So
hmm
there we go. Lenore's claim to illiteracy definitively disproven by this week's topic.
Yes, yes. We found the one other book that I've read. Why didn't we start with this book, the podcast? Right? We started with Brave New World, didn't we?
Yeah, well, we were thinking fiction exclusively originally. Is I think
hmm
it took us a really long time. In fact, I think the first book we covered that was not explicitly fiction was Compassionate Capitalism, which is like over a year into the podcast.
I guess, yeah. That was wow. God, compassionate capital. Was it compassionate capitalism or was it fucking sissy hypno whatever Sisyphus?
We did cover Myth of Sisyphus, but that kind of does land in a bit of an in between spot. Regardless, we're very excited to cover the Communist Manifesto. Jen, how are you doing? I will say, Jen, did you change your background recently? Maybe I haven't.
I did a little bit of rearranging in my recording room. Yes, thank you for
It looks
noticing.
great. Looks
Thank
fantastic.
you. These are my
Uh,
Vietnamese propaganda posters right here. Yeah, very cool.
everybody who doesn't, everybody who's like, Jacob, this is an auditory medium. That means you don't follow Jen on social media because you too can see it. Let's fucking do this thing. I'm excited. Um Obviously people are going to know what we're talking about. I'm going to link in the episode, the show notes, a link to the Communist Manifesto, both
Mhm,
auditory
mhm.
and a text link. It's not very long. Highly recommend you read it before listening to this episode, but you definitely don't need to. We're going to quote from it. We're going to talk about it. So no pressure on that, or read it afterwards. It's a very quick read. It's much more easy to read than you might expect for a book that will like turn for a text that will turn 200 in our lifetimes.
Damn. I
The,
think that listen and then read and then maybe listen again is the way to approach it, because some of the language is a little weird.
Sure.
You know, I've read it several times, and every time I read it, it makes a lot more sense. So I think it's good to revisit things like this and then listen to your super cool internet friends talk about it also.
we will explain it. What was the first time y'all read the Communist Manifesto?
That would have been in high school.
Okay.
In my senior year world history class, that was one of the things that our teacher, who I found out later was a trot, he never brought it up in conversation, but like he had us read it because he was like, yeah, like, you know, politically, like this is one of the foundational texts
Right.
of the of the states that would shape the world order in the 20th century. So, you know, this is just necessary to learn.
That's very cool.
Lenore, I
I'm
think that
pretty
would become
sure.
a national news story now if that happened in a high
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, I'm pretty
Well,
sure I would not have been allowed to even try that in Texas.
well, that teacher was notable for other reasons that I won't get into on the show. But
Yeah, being a
Oh,
trot,
bummer.
one of them. You know, and I've mentioned this before. It took me way too long to get around to these things. Like, I spent my 20s organizing anti-corporatism stuff, and nobody in any of that movement ever said, "Oh, you should probably read this. Like, this would help a lot." So I didn't read this until 2019.
Gotcha.
Which is crazy. Yeah. And I listened to it on an audiobook that also came with Kropotkin's Conquest of Bread. So I read that second, or I listened to it second.
oh, let's go.
Yeah.
I actually quite like Conquest of Bread, despite not
I
being
think
an
it's good.
anarchist. There's a lot of really nice stuff in there.
Yeah.
It's a very encouraging book.
Mm-hmm.
I first read the Communist Manifesto, I believe, my freshman year of college. I was taking just sort of like a modernist political like texts class, and it was one of many. My professor certainly was not a Marxist and was certainly fairly critical of the text, but you know, we were reading a lot of stuff, so it was in there. And I remember being like, okay, this is this is pretty cool. I like this stuff, you know, whatever. It wasn't until I sort of re-engaged with this stuff a few years later that I was really getting into socialism. That I was like, oh wow, this shit really bangs and this shit really applies in some interesting ways. But that context is, of course, useful. And speaking of context, I think Lenore has a bio on Mr. Karl Marx himself. Now, Friedrich Engels also helped write the Communist Manifesto. He was the co-author of it. However, both these guys have very packed lives, and we will certainly be covering a text directly by Engels at some point. So we decided to make today's bio just like a Marx-focused thing because both of them kind of deserve their own episode talking about their lives. So sorry to the Engels heads out there. No disrespect. No disrespect to our favorite class trader, but we will be talking about him at length at another time.
Yeah, look forward to that. We will get around to them. Let me see. Okay, so yeah, Karl Marx. He was born on the 5th of May, 1818 in Trier. He was the third of 9 children of a petty bourgeois Prussian family. His father, Heinrich, was an attorney who also had income from several vineyards, so he's doing pretty good. Now, young Karl was baptized Lutheran when he was 6. He was privately educated until 1830, at which time he was sent to a school run by a friend of his father. Now, his father was a liberal who believed there ought to be a constitutional monarchy. Prussia, of course, was not one of these at this time. Also, liberals, many of the staff at the school. So young Karl grew up around a lot of liberal humanist literature and discourse. And this did not sit well with local police, of course. They raided the school in 1832, and several of the staff are replaced under pressure from the government while Marx attends. So from a very young age, he is exposed to political repression.
I will note, too, something that I think is an interesting context for his life is that he comes from a Jewish family that converted to Christianity
Yes.
for social reasons. His father does not believe God exists, right? Like being baptized into the Lutheran Church is very much like we're trying to like, he's trying to ascend into the bourgeoisie, he's trying to ascend into the upper classes, is limited by the anti-Semitism of the place he's in, and is like trying to be like, well, if I have sons baptized into the Lutheran Church, then maybe I will be more accepted, which is the way a lot of like assimilation worked in the period.
Precisely. Yeah, the Prussia had picked up the Rhineland like fairly recently before Marx was born, and so yeah, the conversion from Judaism to Christianity was pretty much it was what you had to do to save your career if you were in Heinrich Marx's position.
And of course, Marx would be a committed Lutheran for the rest of his life. It's a
Yep.
joke.
Yep. The Lutheran shelf. When he's 16, Karl Marx, he goes to the University of Bonn because he went to university when he was 16. He wants to study philosophy and literature. His dad's like, no, you're doing law, like me. So he joins the Poets Club, he joins the Tavern Club, getting your extracurriculars in. When he's 18, he fights a duel with a member of the Bow-Russian Corps, which is basically a fraternity for aristocrats, so I don't care what precipitated the duel, I'm forced to assume Marx was in the right. His dad steps in and sends him to U Berlin to turn his academic career around. Now, this is 1836, and this is a big year for Marx because this is the year he meets and becomes engaged to Jenny von Westphalen, who he would marry in 1843. Now, he's marrying up, she's marrying down, she's from the petty nobility, and she breaks up actually with an aristocrat to be with him.
Pretty cool.
I mean, wouldn't you?
It would be more narratively satisfying if the aristocrat was the one he was fighting the duel with, but we'll take it anyway.
When we make our own movie version of Karl Marx's life, because there have been a few. There's the young Karl Marx. There's the was it a movie or was it an anime that the Communist Party of China commissioned for his 200th
It was
year
an anime.
anniversary? We gotta read that.
No,
watch that.
it
Good, go
was. I don't like with no disrespect meant at all to young Karl Marx. There is a lot of stuff in that where it's like, okay, this is like a Marvel movie. It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
my name,
Proudhon.
Yeah, Proudhon. looking into the distance.
So he reads law at. He would go on to have 7 kids, by the way. So he reads law at Berlin, but he's still interested in philosophy. And he falls in with a student group that's into Hegel, and now he gets the ball rolling. It's with the young Hegelians that he gets into the dialectical method, whereby all things are in a process of continual evolution, resulting from their contradictions, and he starts building the language to critique society from the left, which is a thing he likes to do. He gets his PhD in 1841, and because his doctoral thesis is a stridently atheist piece, he has to submit it elsewhere. He submits it to the University of Vienna, where that sort of thing is like more tolerated. From this point on, his philosophical work is mainly on dialectical materialism. He picks up the dialectic of Hegel, he filters it through his other big influence, Ludwig Feuerbach. And now we're moving. He wants to become a professor, but he correctly surmises that the government would make this untenable for a radical like himself. Instead, he becomes a top contributor and then the editor-in-chief of a political opposition paper called the Rheinische Zeitung. He writes on housing for the poor. He writes on peasants being forced to steal wood from forests for lack of fuel. That's where the movie The Young Karl Marx begins. And he manages to triple his newspaper circulation in a very short time. But this lasts barely a year before the government shuts him down. This over an article criticizing the Russian monarchy. And like Tsar Nicholas I actually asked the Prussian government, hey, ban this guy. And they're like, sure, all right.
It's very similar to when our Twitter account got banned. It's kind of it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah. Putin was like, hey, ban this guy.
Yeah, it was Russiagate.
The real. I'm not even going to joke about the real Russiagate. There is no real Russiagate. He moves to Paris with Jenny, and he gets into communism. This is the thing. He didn't invent communism. He fell in with working men whose ideas he considered unrefined, who called themselves communists in many cases, but whose character he respected. And now he starts a new journal in the vein of the Rheinische Zeitung, the Deutsch-Französische Jahrbücher, the German-French yearbooks. And this gets him the attention of a contributor named Friedrich Engels. This is where he first calls for a proletariat uprising. This gets him kicked out of France. And a pattern in his life you will notice. Whenever he gets kicked out of somewhere, he goes into exile, and they're like, okay, you're going to chill now, right? And he's like, yes. And then he actually starts another newspaper like a boss.
Yes.
Now, Engels had a similar upbringing to Marx. I'll get into him a little bit, but not much. He was the heir to a textile firm that controlled several factories, and he was repulsed by the working conditions that prevailed there. Engels, when they first meet, goes, hey, I wrote this book. It's called The Condition of the Working Class in England in 1844. And Marx is like, okay, this is the coolest shit ever. From this point, he's like, okay, bet, the working class is going to usher in the next stage of human history. And this is where the three major components of Marxism really start getting synthesized. He develops his philosophy from his extensive study of Hegelian dialectics, of his experiences with French socialism and British political economy, what he learns about that from Engels. By 1845, he's worked out scientific socialism. He believes, okay, an organized workers' movement can seize control over their conditions through struggle based on a thorough, materialistic understanding of the world, which also they build through struggle and study. So he and Engels relocate to Brussels in 1845. He's allowed to do this on the condition that he stop publishing about politics. Obviously, he does not stop publishing on politics.
And we never heard about him again.
He went into, I don't know, being a cloth merchant or something. What do you do in Brussels?
Beer?
Yeah,
Beer.
mostly that. Kiss Engels. I don't know. Lenore, did your research show if they ever kissed a little bit, just like a little bit?
They must
Just on
have.
the
They,
nose, a little
you know
peck.
what? It's the beards. You know what? Just imagine.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh.
God, those getting like intertangled.
Okay, in the
Yeah,
moment that
maybe
would be
not.
hot, right?
Yeah, they
What
may
if-
have enjoyed it.
If you were that way inclined, yeah. That year, what he does do is he renounces his Prussian citizenship. He's like, I'm done with this shit. So
Yeah,
here's
fake
where we get
country.
today's
Fuck you.
text. Yeah, Prussia's no longer around, and we just lost all our Prussian listeners. Here's
We
where we
don't
get.
have any Prussia. There's no Prussia. It doesn't, like, it's a region, but like it doesn't like exist as a nation state, which Marx, using the science of dialectical materialism, was able to foresee, which is why he renounced his citizenship, because he knew it wouldn't be legally applicable within a few years.
He's like, I'm getting out of this while I can.
Yeah.
So here's where we get today's text, right? In 1847, Marx and Engels joined the secret society of largely German immigrant craftsmen called the League of the Just. And the League is like, hey, we're changing our name to the Communist League. We want to go public and get into agitation. We're commissioning y'all to write up a political program. This is that program. Now, the manifesto was written in 6 or 7 weeks. It goes through some evolutions. Engels puts out a document called the Draft of a Communist Confession of Faith, which is a series of 22 questions and answers laying out the beliefs and aims of the communists. I will share the first two. Question 1. Are you a communist? Answer. Yes. Question 2. What is the aim of the communists? Answer. To organize society in such a way that each of its members can develop and utilize all his potentialities and powers in full freedom without jeopardizing the foundations of this society. There's kind of a catechism format going on. They abandoned that partway through writing this thing. Engels also writes Principles of Communism around this time. And this is where he's like, hey, we need a more historical basis for what we're advancing. This can't just be, question answer. Like, we need the force of history proving to larger society that, our time is coming.
That would be where they split with the right Hegelians. The right Hegelians were just very like, well, what if we like spiritualize things? You know what I mean? The thing with Hegel is he was very smart, but he was one of those guys you could read in a lot of ways. One of my favorite jokes is that I have to say is that the disagreement, the academic disagreements between the left Hegelians and the right Hegelians were resolved at a 6-month-long seminar called the Battle of Stalingrad, which I've always thought was pretty funny.
So good. So by this time, it's been almost 6 months since they were commissioned to put this thing out. Marx has been delaying and delaying and delaying while doing other political writing and agitation and movement work.
Just like me, for real.
The Communist League hits him with an ultimatum in the last week of January 1848 to finish this thing by February. He finishes it, and very quickly, very possibly editing as he goes, because to our knowledge, only one draft page survives. Who knows if this may change. So it's published in German initially, anonymously, in late February. On the 4th of March, Belgian police kick Marx out of the country on allegations that he's used his inheritance to arm revolutionary Belgian workers, based if true. He flees back to France and he starts a new newspaper before moving to Cologne.
You
Now,
better
Oh
pet
my
that cat.
goodness.
She is
she is
upset.
so feisty. She's a right Hegelian, unfortunately.
Oh no.
Damn it.
Not as in
Now,
right wing, just as incorrect. Just as
mhm,
incorrect,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
a wrong Hegelian.
Wrong Hegelian. Right Hegelian implies the existence of wrong Hegelian, yeah.
Now, initially, the manifesto is relatively obscure. It's made more so by the defeat of the revolutions of 1848. There is some progress made in Europe at this time. France overthrows their monarchy, establishes their second republic. Prussia gets a constitutional monarchy, but their parliament very quickly collapses. They're still very much under the supervision of their military. Um, in November 1850, the manifesto gets its first English translation. This I thought was pretty funny. That version begins: a frightful hobgoblin stalks throughout Europe. We are haunted by a ghost, the ghost of communism.
Frightful hobgoblin.
Who would
Uh,
being a frightful hobgoblin?
That's what I'm gonna be for Halloween.
Hell yeah.
I know there was a translation of it that called it a bogey, which I also like a lot.
Nice.
A bogey is haunting. Yeah, it's just like
Still.
everybody from the Monster Mash is haunting Europe.
Yes.
A mummy.
Dracula and his son.
Unfortunately.
A Frankenstein is haunting Europe.
A little girl crawling out of a TV is haunting Europe.
Yeah, the Ender Dragon is haunting Europe. It's really scary.
Marx would have loved Minecraft.
It's
The
literally
first time
just that verse from Monster, that song Monster. Is like goblins, ghouls, Godzilla.
The first time it's published in Germany, the manifesto, is in Berlin in 1866. There was an unauthorized Russian translation in 1869 by Mikhail Bakunin. The working people are kind of like on the back foot after 1848, but it's circulating underground nonetheless. In Cologne, Marx is routinely harassed and tried for various allegations in the meantime. They can't hold him on anything. They do shut down his paper and kick him out of the country. In August 1849, he's like, okay, I'm going to London. That's where he spends the rest of his life. Now, he and Engels split from the Communist League after this point when a faction gains control that advocates for an immediate armed uprising, which they consider to be adventurous. From 1850, now, he's still writing, but he and his family are living in extreme poverty, mostly on an allowance from Engels, but also at making somewhat of a living as a European correspondent for the New York Daily Tribune. This is the newspaper of the abolitionist Horace Greeley. And he writes for them until 1863, because their new editorial board takes an enlightened centrist position on the American Civil War. They're like, hey, just pursue peace with the South, and we'll work it out, which is bullshit. The following year, he gets into the International Working Men's Association. This is what we call the First International. It is a transnational organization of various political parties and union orgs. He gets elected to their general council. Now, much of the International's existence is characterized by a struggle between Marx's communist wing and Bakunin's anarchist wing. They oppose the transitional phase of a worker state and the establishment of a stateless and classless society, which we all want. Bakunin's people ultimately lose, but the influence of the International declines because the headquarters is transferred from London to New York City in 1872 to lessen the influence of the factional struggles gripping Europe. Now, the previous year, 1871, what happened? The Paris Commune. Parisian workers captured and held the city of Paris for 2 months. That is the most consequential labor action that takes place during the First International period. Marx drops everything, devotes his writing and study to it. Originally, he intends to produce an address to the workers of Paris. Ultimately, he decides to address his assessments of the situation to the workers of the world more broadly. This is a pamphlet called The Civil War in France, which we should also cover at some point. By this time, he's published volume 1 of his magnum opus, Das Kapital. The other 2 volumes are completed and published posthumously by Engels. Jen has a great series on capital. Go listen to it on How the Red Was Won. He's also put out Theories of Surplus Value, colloquially considered the 4th volume of Capital. That actually wouldn't be published until the 1960s in the Soviet Union. Now, I'm speed running this a little bit so we can get to the text. He had a horrible diet and he smoked and he drank heavily throughout his adult life. He would work long hours into the night when he was inclined to do so. Uh, was basically all or nothing. This gave him lifelong problems with his liver in particular. Jenny died in December 1881. This contributed to the final decline of Marx's health. He died in the 14th of March, 1883. He was buried by family and friends in East Highgate Cemetery in the Atheist Quarter, reburied nearby. You can go visit his tomb. This was in 1954, and his tomb bears the message, "Workers of all lands unite."
There you go. He definitely, yeah, he definitely, you're talking about the way he worked is very interesting. You can't, diagnose somebody from history usually. Sometimes you can, but it's like,
But
okay, that's dyslexia. But the descriptions of, and you also have descriptions of police reports on him of, he spends like a week where he is like incapable of moving from the couch, where he's like, where he can like barely get up to get food. He's just like staring into space, and then he spends 2 weeks furiously writing and not sleeping. Feels very manic depressive to me. uh
mhm.
Again, you can't diagnose somebody from history, nor do I have the degree to do that, but there's some stuff going on brain wise there, which I find encouraging, as someone of less than great mental health. Frankly, anytime we talked about this on the Lennon episode, anytime someone from great man from history or great woman from history, great person, has like, real problems and is like a real human being that's like going through it. So, guys, listeners, I know a lot of you are broke. Just be like, don't be like I'm broke. Just be like, I'm in my Marx era. You know what I mean? Like, but I would encourage you to, like, wash your ass and not drink too much. That's a downside of Marx. We don't follow that element of his life, nor do I think he would recommend it
I just
to
Mhm.
feel like
us.
the phrase wash your ass has come up so much lately. We had a whole discussion on Half the Sky about it. And at our local organizing meeting yesterday, it was brought up. It was, I assume, none of our comrades. But why is there a trend lately of men not washing their asses? Is everyone
Yes.
in their Marx era right now? Like, what is happening?
Okay, this is a thing that like women have been reporting online of straight men have been like, you don't have to wash your ass.
Oh my god.
Like, you don't have to wash your ass, like the water in the shower just kind of falls down on it, so it's fine. It's at the
It's a
bottom, so
white
it's all
people
good.
thing, too, right? Like, this is
I
definitely
don't
a
I don't know. I imagine it's whoever, but I couldn't tell you
I just
specifically.
imagine like whoever is considered the default in our society is like, irreversibly degenerated.
yeah. Yeah.
Regardless, I just,
Wash your ass.
yeah, there was like definitely a trend of women being like, yeah, these I dated a man for 10 years who never washed his ass. It's
Oh
like,
my
well,
god.
Also,
I
yeah,
would
what
have.
are you doing? Don't do that.
This too is connected to Marx's theory. Uh, One assumes that Marx had access to a modern shower, and maybe he could have made that happen. I don't know. Uh,
Mhm.
7
that's
kids.
neither here nor there. 7 kids is true. And then Engels long outlived him. I gotta say, in these like prefaces to different editions of the Communist Manifesto, you get into when you get into the late 70s and the 80s, they're like the first few editions, all of them are written by Marx and Engels, the prefaces, and then it becomes just Engels, and he says in several of them, like literally multiple times, talks about how much he misses Marx. It's a huge bummer. um
Oh.
Putting that in the like preface to the manifesto is quite sad, but
Mhm.
you know
Well,
um
and like, on the subject of things sad, like Jacob, you said it very well in the outline that you spun up here, right? There is such a thread of optimism running through this text that, runs at, as we've seen it in imperialism, we've seen it in other, non-fictional texts that we've engaged with from this perspective. There is this constant revolutionary optimism that frequently runs up against, frequently runs up against defeat, frequently runs up against, very imperfect victories, when victories do come.
Mm.
And it's both, initially it's heartbreaking, but it also, you also can't help but be encouraged by it, right?
right.
This struggle has been waged, and it will continue to be waged long after we're gone.
And the version we are reading is not the original 1840s or 1850 English translation by Helen McFarlane. This is not the what was it? What was the word that was used? Hobgoblin version.
Hobgoblin, no.
Uh, This one would be the more commonly one. It was translated by Samuel Moore and Engels together in 1888, is the version that we're working with here. And Jen already read the opening quote. So if we don't have anything more to say about the life of Marx, let's get into this thing.
Well, I took some pretty decent notes on this. I've mentioned this before. I like physical books because I take notes in the margins. And so my book was already highlighted and annotated, and then I just kind of went and reread it and like put them into a notebook. I guess when I reread it again, I'll take these notes until I have like one sentence finally, just like distilled and distilled and distilled.
Finally,
But
the sentence. Yes.
the sentence. I started off with just that 1 and 2. It says, everyone knows communism is powerful and be openly communist. Yeah, Lenore mentioned that also earlier, was like, we should not be hiding like what our goals are. I'm also right now rereading On Practice and On Contradiction for our local reading group. And it's cool reading these at the same time because obviously Mao was writing almost a century later. It's like in 85, 90 years later when On Contradiction came out. And it's cool seeing how these ideas have evolved in that time, but essentially we're still saying the same thing, right? Like I would say On Practice is kind of like his touch grass manifesto. It's like, this
Mhm.
is how we put these things into actions, but this is the starting point. This is about more of the intellectual side of it and understanding how the things work. And it's just such a good and short and concise analysis of this. The history of all hitherto society is the history of class struggle, and then really just in like 40 pages explains that so succinctly. It's very cool.
Mhm.
And if you're
Yeah,
interested in On Practice, we do have a bonus episode on that. Go back
Ding
and
ding.
listen to it.
Ray from Pearlspot is there. They're wonderful. I have a note in the margins on practice as well, Jen. It's in the first chapter here. They direct their attacks not against the bourgeois conditions of production, they being the workers, but against the instruments of production themselves. They destroy imported wares that compete with their labor. They smash machinery to pieces. They set factories ablaze. They seek to restore by force the vanished status of the workman of the Middle Ages. And that's, if you've just read On Practice, right, that's where Mao's talking about the initial stage of consciousness, right? They're struggling against the way things are now before they've really put together that, okay, we have to wage a larger systemic battle.
Well, to bring us back in to go through the order here. The beginning here, the intro, and there's the intro and there's part 1, bourgeois and proletarians. This is where we're defining basically who is who. And we already mentioned it, but let me read a quick quote here. The history of all hitherto existing society is a history of class struggles. Freeman and slave, patrician and plebeian, lord and serf, guildmaster and journeyman, in a word, oppressor and oppressed, stood in constant opposition to one another, carried on an uninterrupted, now hidden, now open fight. A fight that each time ended either in a revolutionary reconstitution of society at large or the common ruin of the contending classes. Stick with me for a moment if you're not following this. We'll explain it in a second. In the earlier epochs of history, we find almost everywhere a complicated arrangement of society into various orders, a manifold gradation of social rank. In ancient Rome, we have patricians, knights, plebeians, slaves. In the Middle Ages, feudal lords, vassals, guildmasters, journeymen, apprentices, serfs. In almost all of these classes, again, subordinate gradations. The modern bourgeois society that has sprouted from the ruins of feudal society has not done away with class antagonisms. It has but established new classes, new conditions of oppression, new forms of struggle in place of old ones. So, if that sounds complicated, basically, here's what it is. In every society that has ever existed, there have been people who've been in charge and people who haven't been in charge, and they have been organized in different ways. Currently, we are organized based around money, based around access to capital, based around who owns businesses, who owns, when they say means of production, that's things like factories, that's things like computers and computer systems that people are using, that's things like the restaurants that are distributing the stuff, the actual, the infrastructure. In previous societies, you've had things like kings. That was a different dynamic with feudal lords. And societies before that, you have like Roman emperors and people of different classes that are born into stuff. In different countries, he's writing from a European perspective. Things have looked different. You can look over to the class system in India that is deeply, like it was deeply, and continues to be, though it's been fought against, deeply tied into like things like Hinduism. You can look into China and like Confucianist practices and the way things are set up and the different types of society. Every society post, their being written history has had this class arrangement. And Marx is making the argument that we are now in a system that is hyper simplified compared to the like extremely arcane orders of old. And it is the owners, the bourgeoisie, and the proletariat. Now, there are some in between spaces that we can talk about, but that is by and large. There are the people who work for a living, the people who get a wage, and there are the people who own, and that is their relationship. That is what Marx is identifying here. So when we say historical materialism, use terms like that can be a lot. We are talking about this idea of the scientific understanding of history and the way that this is how class moves. These classes will always fight until one wins, or there is some kind of domination, or there is some kind of mutual ruin, some kind of collapse. Did I explain that pretty well? Because I know that that's a very essential thing to understand, and I didn't want to gloss over that for folks who maybe haven't dived into historical materialism before.
Yeah, that sounds like it to me. He does get into the smaller classes. He talks about the lumpen and what we would call the petty bourgeois. But what it really comes down to is either you work for a living or you own the company. And
Right.
I think it gets confused a lot nowadays, what we would call like labor aristocracy. But just because your job pays well, and maybe you have some nice benefits, you are still working class. You are still a proletarian. If you lost your job tomorrow, you would have nothing. And
Right.
that is really what distinguishes the two classes.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it says the bourgeoisie is identified by Marx as a class that's been around for a while, right? They they
Hmm.
they aren't something that sprang up one day. There were the Italian merchant republics, things like that. They're running places, mostly subservient to the aristocracy, merchants, bankers. This has existed in feudalism, right? The discovery of the Americas, he says, by like European colonialists, colonialism in general, things like the African slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, things like that, the more and more ability to reach places like India, China, the Far East, and the development of productive technology, supercharged production, supercharged profits. Once again, on the blood and the labor of the most oppressed, especially people who were colonized, and allowed this merchant class to ascend from a sort of secondary position in society to becoming the dominant order and smashing the aristocracy, very literally in many cases. If
Mm.
you look at things that happened in 1848, things that happened in, I mean, the United States with the American Revolution, if you look towards, the French Revolution, things like that, you often even have literally the execution of the aristocracy. In other cases, you have the aristocracy sort of realizing their time is done and kind of joining with the bourgeois class.
Hmm. Hmm. And in particular, in growing their methods of governance from initial, like, city states and small classes like within a feudal system to, the executive of the modern state, as Marx says, becoming a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie, right? In evolving to that point, what have they done? It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound man to his quote unquote natural superiors, and has left no other bond between man and man than naked self interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervor, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy water of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and in place of the numberless indefeasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single unconscionable freedom, free trade. Everything is economics now.
It all do be money. And he like even goes on and talks about the bourgeoisie's torn away from the family, its sentimentality. It's converted the physician, lawyer, and priest, the poet into the scientist, into wage laborers. It has done more amazing and more powerful things than Rome, than Egypt, even the greatest, expressions of power. And it says the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing the instruments of production and thereby the relation of production. He goes on to even say it compels all nations on pain of extinction to adopt the bourgeois mode of production. It compels them to introduce what it calls civilization into their midst, i.e., to become bourgeois itself. In a word, it creates a world after its own image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, revolutionizing of production, of social conditions, of whatever came before, whatever methods of organization came before, of the religion, of family, of the state, right, and of the rhetoric used to undergird them. I couldn't help when reading that bit, the bourgeoisie cannot exist without constantly revolutionizing stuff. I couldn't help but think of the transition from like growing up in school. Like I heard about like overpopulation being a big problem in my social studies classes, and of like how are we going to divide up the resources and whatnot. And now what are people saying? Now like there are too few
Natalism.
people. Yeah, exactly. The transition from overpopulation, like fear mongering, to like natalism in our lifetime, specifically from white supremacist billionaires, has been so smooth, practically overnight. You know,
Well, they have to
Hmm.
completely change the language. They have to change the economy. They have to always have a new
exactly.
thing. Crypto, NFTs, AI. They always have to be introducing new shit. Sometimes the new shit's useful. Sometimes it's not, right? The revolutionizing isn't an inherently bad thing, but they have to constantly be upending the order to do what do we always say? It's a meme, but line go up is literally the logic of the bourgeoisie. It if and look, if they don't do it, it's not a moral thing. I mean, they obviously behave immorally and which make it happen, but it's not a moral thing. Plenty of people refuse to follow the logic of line go up. You know what happens to
Hmm.
them? They stop being bourgeoisie. Like that.
Mm.
That's yeah. That is the way the society is organized. It further notes it creates huge urban areas and imbalanced international development. That's very important. We talked about Lenin's imperialism a couple of weeks ago. Uh,
Hmm.
Marx is identifying, it had not obviously Lenin's theory adds on Marx here, but like Marx is already identifying, hey, seems like the countries are developing differently based on the means of production. But he says they've centralized too much to hold on to their power, right?
Modern bourgeois society, with its relations of production, of exchange, and of property, a society that has conjured up such gigantic means of production and of exchange. It is like the sorcerer who is no longer able to control the powers of the netherworld, whom he has called up by his spells. Yeah, that's cool.
It's so evocative, the prose here.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, it's I couldn't help. There's several lines that I have underlined after that point
Mhm.
where I just have AI in enormous letters, right?
Yeah.
Where it talks about the productive forces no longer even furthering the development of the conditions of like bourgeois property, right? They're too powerful for these conditions. The logic of these things, right? And they bring disorder into the whole of bourgeois society, right? It is something like AI, right? Something like unfettered speculation based on what these data centers that are going up right now are undergirding, right? It's not useful for anybody but literally the financiers speculating on this, right?
Well, and
Yeah.
also the powers of the netherworld, but he can't control are also what? The working class. That you brought
Mm-hmm.
together a lot of people into urban areas that were spread out, peasants. You raised their ability to sort of, I mean, doing this thus, leads to increased literacy, increased competence with machinery, things like that. And you flatten social relations in such a way that all these like divided up people now see each other for what they are, and you have demystified society. You are making it so, not that like religion doesn't still play a role in ideology, which Marx understands, but you're like removing the like feudal understanding that like, oh, God put me here. The idea that you can ascend, that you can change your position in society is now firmly ingrained in the way we understand society. And so you suddenly have made this class of people that are, as he refers to later, your literal grave diggers,
Mm-hmm.
should they revolt.
Mm-hmm. Which casts this bit in a new light, where Marx talks about how the bourgeoisie deal with this stuff that gets out of their control, right? The enforced destruction of a mass of productive forces, right? If you think of labor as a productive force, right? If you think of autonomous police and military drones, right, trying to solve the arithmetic of there being more of us than there are of them, right? Enforced destruction of a massive productive forces suddenly takes on a much, much darker meaning. Not just the milk dumps of COVID where they can't sell enough stuff, right? That, or by the more thorough exploitation of old markets or the conquest of new markets, right? Eventually, you run out of those. Eventually, there is a great confrontation.
Yes. I like that he basically says that like the working class, the proletariat class is the productive class. The
Hmm.
bourgeoisie creates nothing except the bourgeoisie has forged the weapons that bring death to itself, and that is essentially the working class. The only thing that the bourgeoisie has created is the working class, which will be its downfall.
Hmm.
That is
Hmm.
cool
And
as
I think
fuck.
Marx even, further identifies some years after this in Capital, like the things the bourgeoisie was able to do as sort of a historically progressive force past aristocracy. Like the aristocracy, feudalism goes away or fades. The bourgeoisie is able to make like a system that is genuinely allows for more like social mobility and things like that. But is identifying here that it's outlived its usefulness, or if it hasn't by 1848, it certainly will very soon, right? We are on a trend where this thing will hit the wall and you don't need it anymore.
And a trend where it becomes increasingly impossible to hide these contradictions, not just because of your daily conditions of, well, this is bullshit, my rent's going up and my wages are not, but the more openly this despotism proclaims gain to be its end and aim, the more petty and hateful and more embittering it is. Recall Elon Musk, that interview that he gave recently to, I think, The Economist or some shit, where he himself in any interview does not come across as like a human being, right? Recall Mark Zuckerberg and how, and the consultants he had to talk to even begin to appear like a normal person, right? Gretchen Whitmer just the other day, we're used to saying, people saying no to data centers, and we're like, well, we'll do it anyway. Like, it is literally impossible for these people to hide their aims, and so must that be for us.
Mm.
It's crazy. Like Musk makes Zuckerberg look deeply human when he gives an interview, and that's hard to do because God, Zuckerberg is a what a weird group of guys. And it refers to the seizure that will come as he uses the quotes war. At another term, he says civil war, and another time he uses the term violent overthrow. Marx feels very strongly that this transformation will happen through a violent overthrowing of society. He is
Hmm.
looking explicitly at the French Revolution. He is looking at the failed or partially successful revolutions of 1848. He believes that there will be an armed insurrection of the workers that take the shit down and transform society. That is how he is viewing it at this point, from his vantage point in the 1840s. And he believes that this will happen on a nation by nation basis, though he says in here, workers have no nation. It is our interest to work across borders, but he does believe like this is going to happen, like it's going to pop off in different places at different times,
Right.
which
They
is true.
have they have they have a nation, like, insofar as they have different states and different factions governing them in this or that country. But these differences, as he says, uh, just like distinctions of age, just like distinctions of sex, we can also say distinctions of like race and culture. For more on that, go to our Fighting Times episode. Right. All these things become elided as more and more people become proletarianized and immiserated.
Well, and that brings us into chapter 2 or section 2, proletarians and communists, right?
Mhm.
um where it says, where he's defining what do we mean by a communist, what are we, which is really what this document's about,
Mhm.
aside from just like aura farming, which it is also doing. It says, in what relation do the communists stand to the proletarians as a whole? The communists do not form a separate party opposed to the other working class parties. They have no interests separate and apart from those of the proletariat as a whole. They do not set up any sectarian principles of their own by which to shape and mold the proletarian movement. The communists are distinguished from the other working class parties by this only: one, in the national struggles of the proletarians of different countries, they point out and bring to the front the common interests of the entire proletariat, independent of all nationality. Two, in the various stages of development which the struggle of the working class against the bourgeoisie is to pass through, they always and everywhere represent the interests of the movement as a whole. The communists, therefore, on the one hand, practically are the most advanced and resolute section of the working class parties of every country, that section which pushes forward all the others. On the other hand, theoretically, they have over the great mass of the proletariat the advantage of clearly understanding the line of march, the conditions, and the ultimate general results of the proletarian movement. The communists, thus, are, the people who are cleared out about the position they're in and intend to organize the working class to take power internationally.
Yes. And it's jumping early with that. The international aspect is what is so important. It's what differentiates Marxism, Leninism from other, and we get into the different like utopian forms of socialism later, some of them that neglect that international aspect. Because really, this is how the book ends, it is workers of the world. And when we forget that aspect of it, that's how we end up with social democracy or things like that, offer decent things to the people living there, but still engage in colonialism and imperialism abroad.
Right. We get into a series of objections here that they start
They're addressing you now.
Yeah, they're like, you might have some some problems, so let's talk about it. It says he says, quote, he's talking to the bourgeoisie, are horrified at our intending to do away with private property. But in your existing society, private property is already done away with for 9/10 of the population. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hands of those 9/10. You reproach us, therefore, with intending to do away with the form of property, the necessary condition for whose existence is the non-existence of any property for the immense majority of society. In one word, you reproach us with intending to do away with your property. Precisely so. That is just what we intend.
This is where we get into, like, the canard that, a lot of anti-communists will throw around as, they're the communists are coming for, your car, your toothbrush, like,
your
whatever
toothbrush,
the fuck, right?
not the toothbrush.
Yeah, there would be one communal toothbrush. And on the previous page, what it said, it's not just, we can talk about, okay, the difference between private property and personal property, right? Private property is, your factories, your machinery, like what generates value that people have to work on and add their labor to generate the value from it. Your personal property is like, the stuff in your house, right? That sort of thing. We can make that distinction very, very easily, and he gets into it a little more deeply here, right? To be a capitalist is to have not only a purely personal, but a social status in production. Capital is a collective product, and only by the united action of many members, nay, in the last resort, only by the united action of all members of society, can it be set in motion. Capital is therefore not a personal, it is a social power. Things have value because we all mutually agree that they have value. Forces of production need our input. Your fucking couch does not need any input but you sitting on it.
Unless you're
JD Vance
JD
would
Vance.
disagree.
That's true.
We're on the exact same frame, exact same wavelength, Jen. JD does have some inputs for his couch, but
so too many inputs for that poor couch.
Look, if it's your personal property, it's okay, but I might not be coming over to your house.
That thing has an aura now.
Yeah. Well, some of these common concerns, I've written them out in the bullet points here. 1, all work will cease. Why do people who own nothing work now then? Like, that's the first one. Then it says abolish the family. The family has already been turned into an economic unit. You have already destroyed the conception of the family. Like
For more on that, go back to our Angela Davis Women Racing Class episode.
Yeah, exactly. Women will be communalized? No, women are proletarians. It is the ruling class that see women's bodies as instruments of production. They add that prostitution, both public and private, which is a dig at bourgeois marriage, must be abolished.
I'm okay with being criminalized.
No.
Well, yes. I was going to say, I know some of our listeners are women that want to be communalized, but that is on your own time. That is not a principle of communism.
I literally got a comment on like a YouTube video that was like, as a woman, how can you support communism when the idea is to communal, like literally said this, like then you would just be a shared asset. How could a woman actually want that? And I'm like, you literally see women as property. Like, what in the
Mhm.
fuck is wrong with you?
Mhm.
Free use
Read
communism.
the book. Read the book.
Yeah, no, it's such a massive self-report on the part of the people leveling this. I mean, literally, he all but says like it's a massive self-report.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, well, the women are workers, so I mean, the men would all like by that logic. Why aren't you asking if the men would be communalized? Like, they're not. They have personal autonomy
Exactly.
still. What the fuck is wrong with you? Uh,
Well,
he
I,
says
I,
we
I
wish to abolish borders. Yeah, the working class. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lenore. If you want to, if you have another thing on that point, then sorry.
I do love how he with special relish he gets into the issue of women, right? From the bourgeois perspective, our bourgeois, not content with having the wives and daughters of their proletarians at their disposal, not to speak of common prostitutes, take the greatest pleasure in seducing each other's wives. Think J.D. Vance and Erica Kirk, right? Bourgeois marriage is in reality a system of wives in common, and thus, at the most, what the communists might possibly be reproached with is that they desire to introduce in substitution for a hypocritically concealed and openly legalized community of women.
Yeah, and he also makes the point again with that dig of prostitution, both public and private. He is saying, like, you have reduced like women in marriages that literally have to have sex with and clean for their men to prostitute. Like that is what you're doing. You like you. I mean, again, Angela Davis episode. You talk about like the the women's role as like social reproduction object that is not treated as like a human with like value or whatever. Um, and so he's also, making that point. It's like you're not, you actually don't have respect for your wives. You fucking weirdos. Funny thing about Engels, the woman he was with like his entire life, they never got married because he was like, I don't believe in bourgeois marriage, which is very
Let's
funny.
go.
I love
Uh,
him for that.
he then got with her sister after she died, and apparently both of them wanted him to, like his when was dying. She was like, my sister's like always been obsessed with you. Like you're free to like date her after I'm dead, which is like that's their business.
That's so woke. That's so much more woke than I am.
That's not my not for me, but like, look, if everybody involved was cool with it, then
Yeah.
who
I
am
mean,
I
he's
to
like, look,
judge?
we abolished the family. We're not related. It's fine.
Fun fact, I forget her name. Let me look up her name really quick because I feel bad. She was important. Um, Mary Burns. Mary Burns, and she was an Irish woman, and Engels' family was not pleased with him for being with an Irish woman. But Mary Burns introduced Engels because she was working class. Engels to a lot of like, okay, hey, rich boy, let me show you like how this shit actually works.
Mm-hmm.
And then Lizzie Burns was the sister.
Mm.
Shout out to Mary and Lizzie. Also, shout out to Jenny Marks, helped edit this text and really helped edit Capital. We wish to abolish borders, he throws out. Well, like, we have no country. Fuck you. Like, the borders are your thing. And they cause wars anyway. Don't give a shit. And then he says, as for religion and philosophical objections, that's not even worth arguing with. We don't feel like doing that. All changes in production bring changes in morality. Christian feudalism did not bind abolishing the religious systems that came before it. Bourgeois liberalism did not mind overtaking the divine right of kings. If you're saying like we are changing morality and how it functions, like, morality, like, oh, private property is like at the core of morality. He's like, well, you know, the logic of Rome was that like slaves was fine, right? Like there have been different systems that have had different morality. This is a morality, yeah, it is a morality that is different than yours. And he does not feel the need to argue with the bourgeoisie about who is more moral. He's like, well, this is our morality. Fuck you. This is morality for like 95% of people. So like, yeah, you're gonna have to figure your thing out because like our thing says that like we don't want people to starve to death. So like, he doesn't really feel the need to like morally convince the bourgeoisie. He intends to overtake them.
Whatever form they may have taken, one fact is common to all past ages, to wit, the exploitation of one part of society by the other. Look, like, yeah, whatever moral, whatever religious, whatever cultural objections people may raise, materially it remains. People are fucking poor, y'all. People can't live.
Right. Then we get into the initial demands. Does someone want to read or go over the initial demands here?
Yes, absolutely. These measures will, of course, be different in different countries. Again, different conditions will force different forms of revolution. Nevertheless, in the most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable. 1. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of lands to public purposes. 2. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax. 3. Abolition of all right of inheritance. 4. confiscation of the property of all emigrants and rebels. He's referring to like rich folks who like flee the country.
Yeah,
Immigrants
it's
with an
immigrants with an
E.
E.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, that's
Yes.
important.
Yeah, basically, yeah,
Capital
right
flight.
wingers and like capitalists who try to
We're talking
leave the
about Peter
country or
Thiel going
whatever.
to Argentina here is what we're
Yes.
talking
Yeah,
about.
or like when people are like, "Well, Jeff Bezos would just leave," and I'm like, "Yeah, but are his factories leaving?
Right.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean?
you can
His
you can stay
warehouses,
you can stay and get to work, or you can fuck off and we can do better things with your property. Yeah.
right?
Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Burkina Faso under Sankara did this, China's doing this on a large scale. Equal obligation of all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. And finally, free education for all children in public schools, abolition of child factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production, etc. I do want to point out, like, when he says like advanced countries, right? The idea being that okay, like the countries where the industrial proletariat has grown strongest, right? That's where he believed that the ruptures would like eventually happen first, like Western Europe, France, England, Germany, all that sort of thing. Um, Later in life, I think, and either of y'all can jump in and correct me on this. I think he was coming around to the idea that okay, this might happen in a more peasant heavy country like Russia.
Mm.
Russia started to be his obsession in his last 5 years of
Yeah.
life. Yeah,
Whomst among
Yeah,
us?
it's one of the few things that, at least at this stage, he did end up getting wrong. And all of these are good ideas and stuff, but the idea that it would happen in the more advanced countries first, I guess Marx failed to consider how good the capitalist propaganda would
right.
be, because it really only has happened in places that were colonized, and the more like peasant feudal societies, right? Russia, China, DPRK, Vietnam, Cuba, like places that had been colonized and occupied. And it really started off as a get the colonizers out. And then we just kind of skipped that step of like the capitalist development. But we also see that a lot of those places, like Vietnam, did the Doi Moi reforms in the mid 80s. China had to do some reforms because the rest of the world is still so capitalist that they couldn't build this like pure socialism the way that, I'm not going to say what Mao wanted, but the way that I think the people originally thought that things could go, they had to make some of these concessions. So there was a lot of that like gray area here that Marx didn't really see happening, because this was what 1847 that this was
Yeah.
written.
And as well, what doesn't he ask for, right? Immediate abolition of money, right? When he says a heavy progressive or graduated income tax, he acknowledges, okay, there are transitional measures that will need to be taken to statelessness, classlessness, moneylessness. We have to, not only set up an infrastructure for the redistribution and the reorganization of money, of capital, of our resources, but acclimate people culturally to okay, this is how we're doing things.
Yeah, these are like reforms. Yeah.
And a thing I probably should have said earlier: these 10 points are 10 points from 1848.
Mhm.
Some of these 100% still. Some of these are
Sure.
not as relevant now. Uh, there's of course agricultural work to be done, but this like desperate need to like put a ton of more people into agriculture has changed with the way
Mhm.
mechanization has worked. The need to more equitably distribute people over the country. Maybe in some countries there's like reasons to do that. In other places, like super cities work just fine. Like this isn't a universalizing, oh, you're not socialist if you don't do these 10 points. Free education for children in public schools, with an asterisk, that has been achieved in a lot of capitalist countries now. And now, yeah, again, free with an asterisk, all kinds of shit, all kinds of fees, and of course, it's unequal. There's a lot of work to be done, and it is better in some capitalist countries than others. Uh, but I will say, also largely because of the work of Marxists, right? Like that these some of these wins, and I will also say the work of we mentioned it, but like Reconstruction in the United States, like despite it being crushed, recently freed slaves, pushing for a universalizing system of public education, also a very important part of this, and also something that like Marx identified, that people like know they're like will push for their shit whether or not even they have read Marx. There is this like inborn thing to like push for building a better society. But
Mm-hmm.
some of this stuff is stuff that we still very much need. So
Mm-hmm.
wanted to note that. I didn't want people to be like, so we have to like divide up every square mile, even like, no, that's not what that means. Socialism is when, socialism was when there is
Socialism is when
as
snow crash.
socialism is when there's exactly as many people living in Wisconsin as in New York. Yeah, in New York, yes.
The great rustication of the New Yorkers.
This gets us into 3, which is the most like Twitter section, socialist and communist literature, where he's just like, and you're wrong, and you're wrong, and you're a dumb bitch, and I hate you. Yeah, but he's also connecting this to dying off classes. There are dying off classes, feudal classes and stuff, and different ideologies and different ways things are organized that are leading to sort of their own offshoots. And Marx wants us to hone in on like, no, we need to support like the industrial proletariat, the working class, they're emerging. So we get like, before we get into this, he defines there's 2 classes that like don't really have their own strain of communism exactly. You have the lumpen proletariat, which is people cast out of traditional labor relations for whatever reason. People like that are in the criminal economy, stuff like that. Marx like is like not like, oh, these people can't be revolutionaries. He does identify that a lot of these people can be sort of used against the proletariat if they're allowed to be. I will say that like people like the Panthers and stuff like that did like some added to some of this theory about how one could work with the lumpen proletariat, and that was also a different conditions. He's talking about a different group of people here in some ways, but it's an
Sure.
interesting
Yeah.
group. And then he also talks about the peasantry, the traditional feudal underclass that's rapidly being folded into the working class. Again, speaking the European context, as we noted when we talked about on practice, feudalism, the peasantry, much bigger in some of these other countries like China, and that there had to be more developed theory on how to fold them into socialist revolution in places where they were like 80% of the country, versus where Marx is writing, the peasantry is very much a fading class.
Mm-hmm.
So
I like
then
your
feudal socialism.
I like your note here on feudal socialism. Traditional feudal lords being folded into bourgeoisie or into coffins.
Right. And that's what was going on. The aristocracy was like the ones that still existed were like, well, shit, we're either going to have to become ruling class or we're getting fucking murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So some of them tried to start saying that in the early 19th century, the aristocrats still around, claiming themselves as leaders of the workers, trying to be like, oh, remember the days of the king and stuff like that. That was great. We're going to do feudal socialism. That's not super relevant now, aside from one bit where it says, nothing is easier to get than to give Christian asceticism a socialist tinge. Has not Christianity declaimed against private property, against marriage, against the state? Has it not preached in the place of these charity and poverty, celibacy and mortification of the flesh, monastic life and mother church? Christian socialism is but the holy water with which the priest consecrates the heart burnings of the aristocrat. Basically saying like, okay, some people will try to do this like old style, go back to the old days, nice with a religious tinge, welfare statism. We cannot trust this. You're
Some
not going to have to
people
worry about
will take their
aristocrats
Some people
anymore.
will take communion and find their way back to faith.
Right. JD Vance literally talks about, we're going to have a robust welfare state once we get all the people that aren't supposed to be here out, is kind of what
Jesus
JD
Christ.
Vance says. And it needs to be distributed through a partnership between the state and the church. And you have to go to church to get your like state funded welfare.
That's
That would
pretty
be
much the definition of fascism. Like,
Oh,
what are
yeah.
we talking about here? That is National Socialism.
Exactly. And that's kind of what he's warning about here. But it's also, there are these people with what he calls heartburn, people who feel quite bad about their position in society. And that also gets into petty bourgeois socialism. Does someone want to talk about petty bourgeois socialism? I also wrote in my notes, oh God, I don't want to define what petty bourgeois means. So one of y'all can do that.
Okay, so petty bourgeois are kind of stuck in the middle, right? These are what modern day we would consider these people like your small business owners, and that can look like a lot of different things. I have two jobs, but one of them is essentially petty bourgeois, right? I work for myself. I own my gym equipment and I train my clients directly through me. There is no boss. So that makes me a sole proprietor. That makes me technically petty bourgeois. I also have a job where I am a
Cancel her.
prole.
Cancel her. Cancel
Cancel
her.
me. Yes. But so people like me are included, but people like me are the ones that are very much closer to the proletarian side of the petty bourgeois. Then you have the people that are your small business owners, your small business tyrants, if you will, your restaurant owners, like your favorite family owned restaurant. The people that own that are petty bourgeois. The local car dealership, your dentist that owns their practice and has all of the hygienists working underneath them.
The January
Those
6th
people.
class.
Yes, and so
The
that
Trump said, "I
can
love my
really.
beautiful boaters." That's who he's
Oh
talking
god.
about. The guys
Yes,
who
so
own little speedboats.
a lot of those people can go either way, right? Most of the time, at least again in modern day, those people see themselves as working their way towards being big bourgeoisie. That is their goals, that is their aspiration. They side with the ruling class because they see their interests as aligned with them rather than their actual more precarious position, because the way that we currently live under like monopoly capitalism, so many of these small businesses have disappeared in the last several decades, right? 20 years ago, it was like Walmart moving into small towns and shutting down all of these your little automotive store, your little corner store, your little clothing shop, all of these things. When Walmart moved in, all of those small business owners became proletarianized. They had to go get the job at Walmart because their business went out of business when the large bourgeoisie moved in. So these people are in this very precarious middle space where they very often disappear into proletarianization, although mentally they very often see themselves as part of the rich ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, don't ever tell them they're not working class, because that will also make them mad. It's an
Yep.
interesting thing. Like
Some of
the
them do work though. Like you'll have a
oh, for
restaurant
sure.
that has a chef owner where the chef very much is in the kitchen every day doing that work. And I would say they're more on that lower end of it because they're doing the work. But a lot of times you have an owner of this thing that doesn't actually work there anymore. Maybe they did originally 20 years ago when they first set up the business, but now they've just hired other people to do the work for them.
It's a trend
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed of like people that have made it quite well, often by hard work. I'm not denying that they haven't, but that will get quite mad if you like imply they're not the average person. But they
Right.
also identify with Elon Musk. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
the guy who wears a Carhartt jacket and drives a $100,000 truck.
Yeah.
And then is like, well, I'm working class because like my dad was a, whatever, welder or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Your dad
Yeah.
built that company and you
Right.
just took
And-
over. Yeah.
or maybe you built that company, right? And that's like I'm not like putting moral judgment on it, but you are not, like, that is just, you're not working class, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But like neither was Engels. But that is a relation of production. Like that is
Yeah.
when we cast this, we're not casting this in like moral terms. It's just like the way things are set up.
Yes. And that is an important thing to always say, is that it is not a moral distinction. A lot of times people, like you said, work really hard to get into this position. I just didn't want to go and work at a Gold's Gym and had an opportunity to set my stuff up the way that I did, right? It's not that I was better, smarter, worked harder. It's just like the way things worked out and I was able to do this. So yeah, it's not a moral judgment. Being working class doesn't make you better. A lot of working class people are reactionary pieces of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Of
Mm-hmm.
course.
It is not a moral standing.
Oh yeah. No,
Well,
I
and
couldn't.
yeah.
I couldn't help but think of when, in its positive aims, however, this form of socialism aspires either to restoring the old means of production and of exchange, with them the old property relations, the old society, or to cramping the modern means of production and of exchange within the framework of the old property relations that have been and were bound to be exploded by those means. In either case, it is both reactionary and utopian. We talked a little bit about this in our imperialism episode, right? You can't just go back to the old production relations. Like that ship has already sailed.
Well, petty bourgeois or petit bourgeois socialism then is this idea of people being like, okay, well, basically somebody was like, we need to go back to the olden days of the mom and pop shop. You know, you used to go and you used to sit down at the counter and order a milkshake for your girl, and it was owned by a local guy in town. It was none of these
Right.
big international businesses, you know, whatever, that kind of thing. And like
Mhm.
it's a trap that can be fallen into, especially when like things were better then, though often they weren't, but you know, it was better. Sometimes it was, depends on the person. The idea isn't to move backwards. In the United States, often we talk about we got to go back to the mid 20th century, to being like whatever, high, yeah, which is great. Some of parts of it are great, high union density, things like that.
Mhm.
But like the idea of, oh, we bring manufacturing back, and we have high union density again, doesn't automatically give us everything we want. It is moving forward, not backwards. Then he gets into German/true socialism. True is in quotes. Is a trend that blended socialism with nationalism and longing for the good old days. It's not exactly fascism, but you can see how fascism came about in areas that this was a popular ideology. I don't think there's much for us to say about this except interesting. Watch this space.
Mm.
Um, and then something more interesting to me, which is conservative or bourgeois socialism, a strong welfare state plus a lot of NGOs plus heavy charity. The idea of a kindly ruling class. And it says, a part of the bourgeoisie is desirous of redressing social grievances in order to secure the continued existence of bourgeois society. To this section
Mhm.
belong economists, philanthropists, humanitarians, improvers of the conditions of the working class, organizers of charity, members of societies for the prevention of cruelty to animals, temperance fanatics, hole and corner reformers of every imaginable kind. This form of socialism has, moreover, been worked out into complete systems. This is going to be more relevant than any of these to us today.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, the socialistic bourgeois, it says, want all the advantages of modern social conditions without the struggles and dangers necessarily resulting therefrom. They desire the existing state of society minus its revolutionary and disintegrating elements. They wish for a bourgeoisie without a proletariat. I mean, this is the U.S., right? This is like, okay, well, we can make the right arguments, we can elect the right people, we can have the right-minded people in power and lay hold of society and its machinery exactly as it is now and just like do the right thing with it. But what do you see, right? You see free trade for the benefit of the working class, protective duties for the benefit of the working class, prison reform for the benefit of the working class. In other words, propaganda, right? You see the existing methodology of preserving our society as it is right now with all its inequality dressed up in propaganda in working class like friendly sounding rhetoric.
I would call this
Yes.
the New Deal Democrat, basically,
That's
Yes.
is kind of.
that's what I have in my notes. Charity, concessions, New Deal, Medicare for all. It's not revolutionary, but it is reformism. He mentioned free trade, prison reform. It is things that sound good, right? Like we want
That are
Medicare
good.
for all, right?
Mhm.
Prison reform would help people, but these concessions are given, specifically things like the New Deal, are given to tampen down revolutionary fervor,
Right.
to squash it, right? To give us our crumbs so that we shut the fuck up. And something I've been finding interesting, at least in like modern day American society, is that if they just gave us Medicare for all and like maybe stopped the police from being quite so murderous, like so much of the movement would end.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
they could probably hold on to power for another century if they just gave us these small concessions, and like
Oh
they
yeah.
won't do it. They
This
want
is
us to string them up.
this is something that Colin Space Twinks talks about quite a lot on Blue Sky. We should get him on the show. The Democrat, even without making concessions like that on that scale, the Democrats could actually do a lot of winning if they just invested in ground game, if they just paid volunteers, right, to talk to people and lie to them more effectively. Yes, but to be considered to be reaching out at all.
Mhm.
Well, then they couldn't pay all that money to their consultant friends.
And
It would have to
APAC.
go to actual people. The thing is, the thing about this is too, Marx was not some guy who was like, don't like fight for reforms. Like he would celebrate when like labor unions would win
Mhm.
raises. He was like,
Mhm.
he said that you should participate in like the struggles of the working class to like fix things. Like there were people that were communists like working to get more free speech and stuff because their papers kept getting banned. Things like that. That was like an active
Mhm.
thing. It's not anti-fighting for better things. It is this acknowledgement that this is not a that this is a truce between two classes that are forever at war, now hidden, now in the open, as he says.
Mhm.
And these things can be won, but we have to see every advance as just that, an advance towards a position. It cannot be this thing where we're like, oh, well, that's the end goal. We'll get there and everything will be fine. We have seen multiple times. I mean, not just because we deserve more, though we do, but also because this shit can be taken back. We have seen so many of our rights that have been hard fought for by great people rolled back over the last decade, and it will continue to happen. And if we re-win them, but don't build a society where these things are guaranteed in some form or fashion, if we don't resolve the class contradiction, there will be another push to take them away. It's how the
Mhm.
math works. It's scientific. There are classes that are opposed to each other. This is how this thing works. And so it's not Mark saying like, oh, well, fuck you if you like are trying to get like better schools in your area. No,
Mhm.
that's a noble goal. It's basically this idea of like, okay, we get the better schools and then we advance further and then we advance further. We need a society
Precisely.
where these things are guaranteed. And
Mhm.
then finally, we have utopian socialism, which is a thing that you don't see very much of anymore, like actually as a mainstream belief. But it's this idea that everybody can kind of come together to do something new, regardless of class. He doesn't have animosity towards these guys. They were an important early step in dreaming of socialism. It's just like they were kind of needed to prove that shit didn't work. Your Edward Bellamy's of the world, your Robert Owens of the world. We're going to build big cooperatives. We're all going to behave well. All the rich people will see that. They'll realize
Mhm.
it's more moral to go along with us. And then we won't do that. A lot of these people are heavily influenced by Christianity. Authentic belief in like the like book of Acts, like we should all live in common stuff, and think that their like fellow rich people genuinely also think like that. He just is like, yeah, it was nice, cool of them to make the cooperatives. They wrote some good stuff. They helped us imagine. This shit's not going to work though, and if you try to double down on it, you're just going to end up making like Jonestown.
Yeah, Vincent Bevins talks about this a little bit in If We Burn, right? The limits of prefigurative politics, right?
Yes.
You can model whatever society you want, but you're still surrounded by the society in which you exist, and that will eventually encroach on and crush you.
In my notes, I wrote anarchists but pussies, aka hippies. This is the hippie movement essentially. Like we want can't we all just get along? Like sunflowers and rainbows, and we're gonna hold hands and sing songs, and then even our former oppressors are gonna hold hands with us, and it'll be good. This
Mhm.
is kneeling in a kente cloth, right? Like this is
Hmm.
nonsense.
And it's interesting because like Marx's other writings about these guys too, he doesn't like dislike them. He just
Yeah,
thinks they're wrong, which they
right.
are. He believes it's interesting. Marx is very rarely sympathetic to a group of people he disagrees with. He is fairly sympathetic to these people, especially like guys like Owens who like put so much of their personal money into these projects. He, in fact, in some of his letters to Engels, is like, no, these guys were extremely useful. Somebody had to prove that wasn't going to work. Like they serve their historical role in that way. Uh, you know, and that brings us to the last section, which is by far the shortest. I think we
It's
should
the
just read the whole
longest
thing.
title and the shortest section. What's up with that, Marks?
Who wants to read? Can someone just read the whole thing?
Yeah, I'll take it. Uh, Position of the communists in relation to the various existing opposition parties. The point he's going to make
Sorry,
here is.
before you go on, this is a terrible title for this section.
Yes, this is the
I
worst.
yeah, like I've based a lot of my life on this pamphlet, but Jesus Christ, come on, it could be better.
Yeah, the point he's making here is okay. Sometimes you make weird alliances, conditions dictating, right? Depending on where you are, depending on politically what's going on. Section 2 has made clear the relations of the communists to the existing working class parties, such as the Chartists in England and the agrarian reformers in America. The communists fight for the attainment of the immediate aims for the enforcement of the momentary interests of the working class, but in the movement of the present, they also represent and take care of the future of that movement. In France, the communists ally themselves with the Social Democrats against the conservative and radical bourgeoisie, reserving, however, the right to take up a critical position in regard to phrases and illusions traditionally handed down from the Great Revolution. In Switzerland, they support the radicals without losing sight of the fact that this party consists of antagonistic elements, partly of democratic socialists in the French sense, partly of radical bourgeois. In Poland, they support the party that insists on an agrarian revolution as the prime condition for national emancipation, that party which fomented the insurrection of Krakow in 1846. In Germany, they fight with the bourgeoisie, alongside the bourgeoisie, whenever it acts in a revolutionary way against the absolute monarchy, the feudal squirearchy, and the petty bourgeoisie. But they never cease for a single instant to instill into the working class the clearest possible recognition of the hostile antagonism between bourgeoisie and proletariat, in order that the German workers may straightway use as so many weapons against the bourgeoisie the social and political conditions that the bourgeoisie must necessarily introduce along with its supremacy. And in order that, after the fall of the reactionary classes in Germany, the fight against the bourgeoisie itself may immediately begin. The communists turn their attention chiefly to Germany because that country is on the eve of a bourgeois revolution that is bound to be carried out under more advanced conditions of European civilization and with a much more developed proletariat than what existed in England in the 17th and France in the 18th century, and because the bourgeois revolution in Germany will be but the prelude to an immediately following proletarian revolution. In short, the communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. In all these movements, they bring to the front as the leading question in each case the property question, no matter what its degree of development at the time. Finally, they labor everywhere for the union and agreement of the democratic parties of all countries. The communists disdain to conceal their view and aims. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries, unite.
Or more preferably, workers of the world unite. Even better.
Yes, yes. Depending on the translation, yeah, that's the better one.
Thank you for reading that section, Lenore. That's how this thing ends. It's like, hey, we're doing a lot of work. It's going to look different everywhere. We're going to have different alliances. It's a weird time. It's going to stay weird. We're hopeful for the future, and we're going to keep this shit going. That's kind of how he ends.
It's such a good way to end. Like, the beginning is a banger, the end is a banger, and most everything in the middle is pretty fucking great too. But I do appreciate this last chapter, if you want to call it. It's just like 2 pages. But it is important to work with other groups, and I know that there's constantly argument about this. There's constant, people online love to hate on the DSA. And look, I'm not a member of it. There's reasons why I haven't joined that group. It doesn't exactly align with me. But to act like we shouldn't work with them on things that we align on is absurd, and it's harmful to any movement for liberation.
And it would be absurd for people in the DSA to not work with. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly, right?
Way.
Like, obviously, I'm not suggesting that we work with Zionists to, I don't know, get healthcare or you know what I mean? Like, there are definitely like lines we should have. We don't work with transphobic people to stop data centers, right?
The KKK was famously in its second incarnation against like chain stores infringing on their little, horrible fiefdoms, like
exactly. So obviously we protect our people, but when we align with groups on a broad spectrum of things that aren't actually harmful groups, like the DSA, like the PSL, like CPUSA, like Palestine Action. There are so many different small groups in existence, and we're so just like, balkanized might not be the right word, but we're just all like segregated into these tiny little groups, when if we had a united front, we could actually work together and argue about the details later. Right? Like, there are obviously some differences between, he just listed these different types of socialism that in some form or another do exist. But I would never, like, if some Trotskyists wanted to work with us on something that we very much agreed on, I would never be like, fuck you, I hate Trots. Like, why would we not work together on the things that we align on? It's very silly the way we refuse to do that so often. And Marx literally has it in the book.
Jen, the most pressing issue in our society is the arguments that were going on in the 1930s in the Soviet Union. Obviously,
Obviously.
um, yeah. I mean,
Obviously.
that's all I can
Stalin
think
and
about.
Trotsky are both dead. Let's fucking deal with what's happening now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, everybody put down your ice axes.
Don't worry. They
Yes.
they both showed up and told me they're cool now with each other and that we can be friends again. They told me that.
They
It
said
was
it. It's
revealed to me
fine.
They
it was
explored
revealed
each
to me
other's
in a
pleasures.
dream. They did. They confessed their feelings to each other in the afterlife.
Communism is yaoi.
It is in a lot of ways. Before we wrap up here, is there anything takeaways here from anything that we feel has maybe evolved past this, or any, I mean, there's new theory that's been introduced, and we already addressed the, like, oh, Germany is on the eve, it was on the eve of a bourgeois revolution, it was not on the eve of a proletarian revolution. Lenin, of course, adds his imperialism thesis, and Rosa Luxemburg adds quite a bit about imperialism. More stuff will come in the form of things like Fanon, Mao, etc. um is there anything in this that we read where we're just like, okay, well, actually, like, I don't know. Quite often, the part that, like, seems outdated is the part about, like, where the revolutions are going to be. Is there anything else in here that we feel is a little outdated, or that maybe deserves a sort of a second look at?
Mhm.
I would just, and I've toyed with doing this, it just seems like a lot to take on. Uh, as much as I do appreciate the flowery language in here, I think writing it in very simple English for an American audience would be a very good thing to take on. Just because we know that Americans don't read so good. And so simplifying it and getting rid of, like, again, it's some of the beauty of this work is the flowery language, but thinking about an American audience, that doesn't, not just that it doesn't appeal to them, but it makes it a little more difficult to understand. I think there would be some validity in taking on that project.
The
Mhm.
Message Bible version of the Communist Manifesto.
I don't know what that is, don't tell me.
Okay,
We'll do an episode on it.
no, we won't.
No.
The whole Message Bible. Are you sure, Lenore? Lenore is agreeing to do that episode by herself, is what I'm hearing.
Hmm.
She's going to read the whole thing.
Yeah, it'll be
It's
great. Y'all be trapped in here with me.
Yep. Well, fun stuff, y'all. This has been good. This is a rich text, like I said. If you haven't read it already, you definitely should. It is a very easy. It's a very easy read in the sense that it's breezy. There's going to be sections where you're like, "Well, what the fuck, Prussian infighting is that?" And it's like, don't worry about it. It's fine. Just, like, keep going. Find the stuff that you identify with. Find the stuff you connect with. Look up the other things later. Uh, this is cool. This is cool. And it's so formative and it contributes to so much. I mean, there's so much that comes after it. And of course, this is not laying out everything about how everything needs to be carried out. This isn't every thesis. This isn't every way that capitalism and socialism and all of that functions. But it is this baseline to stir people up, to get the energy going, to be like, here are our demands. Let's be clear with them. Let's engage with struggle with this long term view of the way things can be. And if there's anything you take away from this, I think it's that view that history is this clash between classes that is going to continue to happen no matter what stage of the clash we're in. And in all work you engage with, regardless if it is revolutionary work or not, whatever that even means, the work, you having a long-term goal and not and not concealing your aims as best you can, to be safe in your environment, to be like, yeah, I have this vision of this long-term vision of a society where everyone shares the labor, where everyone works, where everyone holds things in common, where we have transcended this class bullshit that has been oppressing the people for so long. That is really what is the important meat to take away here, I think.
Hmm.
Hell
Well
yeah.
said.
What are we reading next week?
Oh, it's the
I'm pretty
reader.
sure.
It's the reader selected one, right?
Is that next week? Well, we'll have to figure it out.
Hmm.
We'll have to figure it out, Mike.
What's our next nonfiction text? What's our next theory?
We are
Oh,
going,
it's that
well,
stupid fucking horrible
it's really
Christo-fascist
good.
book.
It's
Oh,
really
have
good.
fun with that. I will not be
I
present for that,
am not
unfortunately.
having fun reading it. I'm openly mad at Jacob about this.
Listen, first of all, this was suggested by our guest.
Well, I'm
So,
mad at your guest, whoever the fuck this is.
Josh Borman. I have made
I'm
him read
mad
some
at
horrible stuff
Josh.
in the past.
Well,
He's
I
made
will.
us
I
read
will.
several bad things.
I will be. I'll
He's
be seeing
suggested
him that
several bad
weekend.
things.
So I will forward your grievances, Jen, to him in person.
Oh, I'll tell him when we record.
Oh, we were discussing Metaxas, and he was like, "Well, we could talk about him." I will say, Metaxas pretty important to understanding Rubioism.
That's what I'm
Apparently,
telling myself. That's what I'm telling
um,
myself. It's so bad. The book jacket description made me livid, and then chapter 1, I cannot. It's so bad.
Rubioism, the strike South doctrine.
But bookmarking it with this and Rodney is gonna be good for me. So
this guy was a hero to me as a child. It's a
you
deeply
were a
embarrassing.
bad person as a child.
I didn't know. To be
You were
fair,
a bad child.
Jen, he had not written this book at that point. To be fair, he was mostly writing histories at that point.
Bad
I
history.
I also thought he was hot. Don't worry about it. We'll get into it on the episode.
He's like Gavin Newsom attractive. He looks like that type of guy.
Yeah, hot.
He looks. Gavin Newsom doesn't. He looks like, okay, he may be like physically like, okay, whatever, conventionally attractive. He looks like he gives you notes on how you fuck. He watches it happen and then he critiques it. I'm convinced that's his only
That's
relationship to it.
extremely specific, Lenore. Do you know something we don't about Gavin Newsom? This is an accusation. No, it's not. Well, folks, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Workers Lit. We have a Patreon. You should check out the Patreon if you're listening to this. This is a free episode. But we have all kinds of cool stuff over there. We have listener selected episodes. We have Lenore running Article Brain, where we are reading the articles that are driving each other insane and reacting to them, going crazy over there. We have Aisha's Author Corner, where she is interviewing authors every month. We've got our monthly video episode where it is us shooting the shit. Pretty fun stuff. So you know, there's some good content over there, and also supports us doing what we do, because as we mentioned, we are all working people except Jen, who is a part of the bourgeoisie. No, I'm just kidding. You
Friedrich
self-identified
Engels.
as petty bourgeoisie, okay?
I'm both though, because I also have a job
No, of
because I
course.
don't make enough money owning my own means of production.
No, yeah, I'm teasing.
Uh-huh.
Please give us money. We appreciate it. And we appreciate all of you listening. And we will see you next week. Anything else?
Bye.
Jen is throwing up peace for all the people who can see.
Which is just you
Which
two.
is us two and Sheila. Bye, y'all.
Pages upon pages, words of wisdom from other workers' brow. Got my nose to the spine, nose soaking up.